All right, Indiana falls 79-78 Sunday afternoon at Simon Scott Assembly Hall to Maryland. I'm Jack Ankony. This is Todd Golden with Indiana Hoosiers on SI postgame reaction video. And Todd, this was a game that Indiana trailed for most of the time, worked their way back, took the lead late. They got up by 4 points, 78-74 with 38 seconds left. Obviously, Maryland scores the last 5 points of the game. How did it happen?
Yeah, Maryland attacked the basket on the possession after IU scored to get it down to 2-point deficit. Trey Galloway missed the front end of a one-on-one free throw opportunity with 22 seconds left. As we found out after the game, IU had a foul to give. They did not on Maryland's subsequent possession, and Rodney Rice hit a three-pointer out on the arc to put Maryland in front by a point. And on Indiana's final possession after a timeout, Maryland knocked the ball out of bounds on the baseline at first. Indiana got another inbounds on the baseline. There were a couple substitutions made with players still on the floor. It seemed to confuse things for Indiana. The ball went into the corner to Miles Rice, and all he could really do was fling up a desperation three. It was well short of the mark, and Indiana lost a real tough one because they had this one in the bag and let it get away.
Yeah, and we can sort of get into the big picture stuff later, but this one is killer for Indiana. They have 4 ranked opponents up next. This is a home game, and for a bubble team, that's one that Indiana really needed to have. And I think it kind of just, if you want to boil it down to just sort of the late game execution, Maryland was better than Indiana in that situation. And I think you were right to say that Indiana sort of looked confused there at the end. I think they had the ball with 5 seconds left. It looked like they wanted to just get it into Renew and give him a chance, but the ball sort of got tipped out almost immediately after the inbounds. And then there was sort of a scramble, some confusion with subs. And
Miles Rice said it in his presser that it caused a little bit of confusion. It was the bottom line is that there were opportunities to put that game away well before that. It probably shouldn't have come to that.
Yeah.
But a bunch of mistakes, player mistakes all across the board. I mean, it was everybody had a little bit of their own, both players and the coaching staff had a little bit of their own culpability here, and Indiana paid a heavy price. I mean, truthfully, they were down for most of the game. A nice inspired comeback. They finally got some stops in the last 7 or 8 minutes of the second half. They finally prevented some of the offensive rebounds that Maryland didn't necessarily score a ton of second chance points, but they were making Indiana defend long possessions, which is always tiring. So they finally got it together, and to let it slip away like that at the end, especially here at home, just can't have it.
Yeah, this is another one where I thought Indiana's 3-point defense really kind of hurt them. Maryland finished 12 for 24 from 3, 50%, and that's a game that after Indiana had just given up 13 points. That was a season high Wednesday at Northwestern. That continues to be a struggle for Indiana defensively, because I thought they did a pretty solid job overall on Julian Reese and Derek Queen, who sort of entered the game having just dominated Illinois in that win earlier in the week. So you did a pretty good job on them overall, I thought. But in turn, maybe that sort of freed up some of Maryland's guards to score.
Yeah, no question. Rodney Rice was probably a little bit more productive than people would have thought coming in. Had a good game. Jacoby Gillespie, who is, when Maryland beat Illinois the other night, they really played a high-low game with Julian Reese and Derek Queen, but that was a matchup-related thing. They couldn't do that as much today. Jacoby Gillespie is Maryland's, one of their best scorers, and he was certainly that today. Indiana is struggling with guarding the perimeter, and it's, as you mentioned, it's become a big problem. And it got a little bit better late in the game, but then Maryland probably wasn't shooting until they had to, wasn't shooting as much from the arc. So it's something that Indiana has to figure out. Otherwise, they're going to be involved in games like this.
Yeah, and just sort of the way that Indiana let this one slip away, I think also takes away from a really inspired effort from Anthony Leal today. He had that and one sort of towards the end. There was one play where Renew kind of lost the ball inside, and he sort of just flew in and made the layup. Made a couple great defensive stops on kind of in the last few minutes, it seemed like the crowd was really, appreciating his effort. He's a guy that I think Indiana can always count on to play hard. He still got the start today, even though Indiana sort of mixed it up. They went Rice, Leal, Mbako. Renew was back in the starting lineup in place of Goody, and then Balo at the 5. I think some changes that they sort of had to make because of Maryland's 2 big guys. But what did you think of Leal today?
I thought he was really good. I thought it was, this is how fragile basketball games are. So Mike Woodson puts in Anthony Leal. It was a minute before the second last media timeout. So maybe about maybe the 9-minute mark is when he came in. I don't have that exactly right, but it was in that period. And my thought at the time, because Mackenzie Mbako is who he came in for, Mackenzie had a good game today. He was productive offensively and wasn't, he was not as obvious a problem defensively as he sometimes is. So I'm thinking, okay, well, they're putting Leal in to give Mackenzie Mbako a blow to the next media timeout. Maybe Mackenzie Mbako comes back in. Because at that point, they were down and needed offense. But Woodson kept Leal in, and it paid off. I mean, the run they made was with Leal on the floor. And so, if this game had been a win, you give Woodson a lot of credit for putting somebody who can, help you on the defensive end of the floor and kind of inspire you a little bit. Made a couple key buckets here on the offensive side of the floor, but it didn't turn out that way. And, Leal, it has nothing necessarily to do with Leal's effort, but it goes to show how these games can turn on very small things. And the evidence was in the crowd and some of that late game timeout confusion was when Luke Goody and Mackenzie Mbako were brought in with players still on the floor for Oumar Ballo and Leal. And the crowd reacted when Leal came off the floor. Now, in an offensive situation, you typically wouldn't want Leal on the floor. He's better on the defensive end.
Right.
But it illustrates the effort that he put out there and how much the crowd appreciates that when he came out. His going out or coming in had really nothing to do with the success of the final inbounds pass, but it goes to show how the effort that he gives. Indiana fans see it from him. I know he's a hometown guy, but it really has more to do with his effort that they don't sometimes see from, or perceive that they see from others.
Right. So just sort of to recap some stats from today, Mackenzie Mbako and Miles Rice led Indiana with 16 points apiece. Indiana shot 41%, pretty solid for them, 7 for 17 from 3. Rodney Rice led the Terrapins with 23 points. Jacoby Gillespie had 18. Selton Miguel, 15. Julian Reese, 14. It was really those 4. Indiana held Derek Queen to a pretty quiet 7 points. Maryland, I thought, controlled the glass for most of the game. It ended up being 35-32. But I thought for a while they sort of controlled the glass in that respect, which sort of helped them build that lead later on. But, like we mentioned before, this loss really stings for Indiana to let it slip away sort of in the final moments, especially when you look at the tough road ahead.
Yeah, no question. IU goes to Purdue on Friday. They go to Wisconsin next Tuesday. Michigan comes here, I believe, the Saturday after that. And then a road trip to Michigan State on relatively short rest on the following Tuesday. So, and then UCLA comes here after that. Indiana put themselves in a position where they have to win at least one of those games, if not 2 of them, to stay on track. So just an absolutely damaging loss. In effect, Maryland kind of cemented their status at Indiana's expense today, which it could have been the other way. It could very easily have been the other way around. So just tough. And, it's not going to help the mood of the fan base. Losing a game like that was, certainly preventable in the way it played out, is not going to do any good for those who, for just the general mood of the fans who aren't going to be inclined to be angry are going to get more apathetic. The fans that are inclined to be angry are going to get angrier, and they have reason to be today. I mean, that game didn't need to be lost. So, it's not going to be a pleasant vibe for the Hoosiers to deal with. And, but, they kind of have to, what they have to do is embrace the rivalry aspect of the game at Purdue on Friday and see what they can do.
Yeah. I did think this was probably the best atmosphere at Assembly Hall this season in terms of fan excitement. So if you look at it from that perspective, it could have been, it was seconds away from being a win that maybe Indiana could use to say, hey, we're approaching this tough stretch, but we just got this big win over Maryland, who I think is like a top 25 team in the net, and a lot of other analytical, like Ken Palm and Torvik and sites like that. But instead, it's a loss that not only hurts because you let it slip away, but also because you're a team that I think going into today was just outside the NCAA tournament picture from Lenardi's latest bracketology. So it hurts you in that respect. And when you look at the schedule ahead, it's probably just going to hurt even more. When you sort of, I think going into this game, you and I were thinking, maybe can they get 3 wins out of the next 7? And this was one that we both sort of penciled in as this is one that they need.
Right.
So it really hurts them in that respect too.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's, you mentioned the crowd, at the final media timeout, I think that was Miles Rice had hit the 3-pointer to put Indiana in front, if memory serves. Yeah. And, there was nobody here. The crowd was into it. The crowd helped them, overcome their deficit. They got behind the Hoosiers. So, sometimes I feel like the angst part of this can be overblown a little bit. There was nobody was, the crowd was fully in their corner. And really were up until obviously the final buzzer. But man, it's hard to stay in that mindset when the team isn't rewarding that level of passion with performance. And today was really disappointing. I mean, if I were walking out of here, if I had bought a ticket as a fan, I would have been very irritated that, they couldn't close the deal. So, and in terms of the big picture, that just adds to it. I mean, it's just going to be tough for Indiana to dig their way out of this. But they know what they need to do, and they need to do it, and they need to show more toughness. And, there were some good things out there today. It's just that they need to, maintain that and avoid things like in the first half, Maryland had 10 offensive rebounds. I mean, it wasn't that they led to many second chance points, but it just made it harder for Indiana. Yeah. Indiana making it harder on themselves to play to their strengths. So it's tough. It's, the atmosphere around the program isn't going to be great, until they are able to put a stop to this 2-game losing streak. But that's the bet they made. Yeah.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up with that. Like I said, Indiana with this one falls to 14-7 overall, 5-5 in Big Ten play. They play Friday at number 11 Purdue, in-state rivalry game, and just a loss that really hurts. Kind of when you look at what Indiana has ahead and the way that they let it slip away. Just a really damaging loss for Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers. So I think that'll do it with our post-game reaction. I've been Jack Ankony. He's Todd Golden for Indiana Hoosiers on SI, and we'll talk to you Friday at Mackey Arena.
Thanks, everyone.